He read the same story for 10 years, knowing how everyone dies, and his only wish was that no one would remember his name. There is a character in modern fiction that I cannot stop thinking about. Not because he's powerful, not because he wins, but because everything he does, every sacrifice, every smile, every carefully constructed plan, is quietly designed to make sure that when the story ends, he simply isn't there anymore. His name is Kim Dokja, and I want to talk about something that most analyses of Omniscient readers' Viewpoint completely miss. Because on the surface, Kim Dokja looks like your standard clever protagonist, the guy who knows how the story goes, the guy who outsmarts everyone because he read the novel. But here's what nobody tells you. The reason Kim Dokja could read that story for 10 years in complete isolation is the same reason he planned to erase himself from it. We're going to answer that. But first, you need to understand exactly what kind of lonely we're talking about. Who? Kim Dokja was before Kim Dokja is an office worker. No friends, no romantic partner, no real family to speak of. He comes in, does his job, and goes home. And every single day for 10 years, he reads one novel. Just one. 3 Ways to Survive in a Ruined World. Now, most people, when they love a story, they finish it, maybe reread it, move on. Kim Dokja doesn't do that. He reads it like it's oxygen. And the author, a writer named TLS123, only ever has one reader. For 10 years, Kim Dokja is the entire audience. Think about how strange that is. One story, one reader, 10 years of updates, a relationship between a writer and a reader who never once speak to each other. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. When you spend 10 years alone with a story, when that story is the primary relationship in your life, you start to reveal things about yourself through what you love in it. Kim Dokja doesn't just love 3 Ways to Survive in a Ruined World. He loves it because the protagonist, Yoo Jung-yuk, suffers endlessly and keeps going anyway. He loves a story about a man who is completely alone, misunderstood by everyone around him, and still chooses to push through. Sound familiar? The apocalypse begins. Then one day, the novel becomes real. The apocalypse from the story, the scenarios, the constellations, the death games, it all actually happens. Right there, on a Seoul subway, mid-morning commute. And Kim Dokja is the only person on the planet who knows what's coming next. Now, here's the question every viewer of ORV eventually asks. What would I do if I woke up inside a story I'd already read? Most people's answer is, use that knowledge to survive. Get rich. Get powerful. Build a kingdom. Kim Dokja's answer is completely different. He decides to save people. Specifically, he decides to save the people the novel said would die. Not for glory, not for recognition. He does it quietly, under the radar. He constantly, deliberately tries to make other characters look like the heroes. He pushes Yoo Jung-hyuk forward. He props up Lee Hyun-sung, Jung Hee-won, Lee Ji-hye. He is engineering a story in which he is not necessary. Because here's what we haven't talked about yet. Kim Dokja didn't just read a story about survival. He read a story that didn't have him in it at all. In the original novel, the version Kim Dokja read for a decade, there is no Kim Dokja. The protagonist is Yoo Jung-hyuk. Other characters orbit him. They live or die by the plot. Kim Dokja exists outside the story, and then the story becomes the world he lives in. So, what does he do? He does what he's always done when he reads this novel. He watches. He supports. He stays at the margins. But here's the thing about the margins. When reality is a story, the margins aren't safe anymore. Constellations, the gods watching the scenarios play out, they notice Kim Dokja. He's interesting to them, unpredictable. He shouldn't know things he knows. And so, against everything he wants, Kim Dokja becomes famous. He becomes a constellation himself, the secretive plotter, an entity of immense narrative weight. The readers of the universe start investing in him. People start depending on him, and he hates it. Not in the way a reluctant hero hates responsibility. Not in a, I didn't ask for this, but I'll embrace it arc. In the way someone who has genuinely never believed they deserve to take up space hates being seen. Kim Dokja smiles constantly in this story. He makes jokes. He's sarcastic. He performs confidence like a man who has practiced it in the mirror. But every plan he makes has the same endpoint. He won't be there when it finishes. He talks about the ending of the scenarios like it's a sunset he's looking forward to, something beautiful that he is not allowed to watch for long. Because in his version of a happy ending, everyone he cares about survives. And Kim Dokja is simply no longer part of the equation. Stop. I want you to sit with something for a second. We are describing a man who, by any conventional metric, is the protagonist of his story. He has plot armor. He has knowledge no one else has. He has the loyalty of incredibly powerful people. He is, objectively, one of the most important beings in his universe, and his deepest, most guarded desire is to be forgotten. That is not a power fantasy. That is not a hero's journey. That is a portrait of someone who has spent so long outside of things, outside of relationships, outside of other people's stories, outside of being valued for simply existing, that they can no longer imagine a world in which they are allowed to simply stay. Kim Dokja doesn't think he's worth saving. He thinks he's worth using. There is a catastrophic difference between those two things. The relationships that break him open. The devastating irony of Kim Dokja's arc is that the more he tries to make himself unnecessary, the more necessary he becomes to the people around him. And that terrifies him. Let's talk about Yoo Jung-yuk first. In the original novel, Yoo Jung-yuk is the protagonist who suffers endlessly and regresses, rewinding time, doing it all over, carrying every failure alone. Kim Dokja understands that suffering. He has read it 1,000 times. He feels it like it happened to him. So, when they meet in real life, when the man from the book is standing in front of him, real and wounded and furious, Kim Dokja doesn't treat him like a character he knows. He treats him like someone worth grieving for. And Yoo Jung-yuk, who has never once been truly understood by anyone across thousands of regressions, notices. Their relationship is one of the most quietly radical things in the story, because Kim Dokja keeps trying to push Yoo Jung-yuk into the role of the real hero, and Yoo Jung-yuk keeps refusing to play that game. He starts fighting to keep Kim Dokja in the story. Then there are the children, Shin Yu-sung and Lee Gil-young, two kids who survive the apocalypse and attach themselves to Kim Dokja like he is the only fixed point in a world that has lost all of its rules. They call him Ahjusi. They fight because of him. They develop their abilities for him. And this is what breaks Kim Dokja in a way that monsters and gods cannot. Because children don't love strategically. They just love. And Kim Dokja, who has engineered every relationship in his life for maximum utility and minimum attachment, has absolutely no defense against two kids who simply decide he matters. Every time he tries to be a stepping stone, these people treat him like a destination. That's the war happening inside Kim Dokja for the entire story. The self-erasure plan. Here's what Kim Dokja actually wants from the story's end. He wants the scenarios to close. He wants humanity to be free. He wants Yoo Jung-yuk to be the hero history remembers. He wants the kids to grow up. And he wants to be the thing that made all of it possible, quietly, from a position that history will never fully illuminate. He wants to be the footnote. In narrative theory, there's a concept called the disposable mentor, the character who exists to give the hero what they need and then gracefully exit. Kim Dokja, consciously or not, has cast himself in that role, except the story keeps refusing to let him play it. Because here's the truth about Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint that the title has been telling you from page 1. The title isn't talking about Kim Dokja reading the novel. It's talking about us. We are the omniscient readers. We can see Kim Dokja from the outside. We can see that his self-assessment is wrong. He is not a footnote. He is not a tool. He is not a mechanism for other people's happy endings. He is someone who learned to love a story about suffering and survival because he was living one. And he never once considered that he was allowed to be saved by it too. So, what happens when someone who wants to disappear is surrounded by people who refuse to let them? They break. Not in a dramatic way. Not all at once. In the way ice breaks in spring, slowly, then suddenly. Then you realize the river was always there underneath. Kim Dokja's arc is not about learning to be a hero. It is about learning to want to live. Those are completely different things. A hero can want to die for a cause. That's actually very easy for Kim Dokja. He's been rehearsing that ending for years. Wanting to live means believing you are worth the inconvenience of your own survival. It means accepting that the people who love you are not confused or mistaken. It means letting Yoo Jung-hyuk grab you back from the ledge, not because you've earned it, but because you matter to him. Full stop. No justification needed. And the constellations, those gods watching the scenarios, they're a perfect metaphor for what Kim Dokja slowly becomes able to do. At the start, he performs for them. He manages their attention. He uses their belief in him as a resource. By the end, he can stand under their gaze and simply be. Not for them, not for the story, not for the ending he's planned, just as himself. Here is why Kim Dokja resonates in a way that most fictional protagonists don't. He doesn't want power. He doesn't want love, not consciously. He wants to matter just enough to make everyone else's life better, and then exit before they realize they could have just kept him. That is a recognizable human feeling. The idea that you are most valuable as a sacrifice, that your worth is conditional on what you provide, that love is something you manage rather than something you receive. Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint is, at its core, a story about a reader who finally stops watching, who steps out of the margins, who lets the people he loves write him into their story, not as a plot device, but as a person. Kim Dokja didn't want to be the hero. He didn't think he was allowed. The greatest thing this story does, quietly over hundreds of chapters, is prove him wrong. Not with grand speeches, not with dramatic declarations, but with Yoo Jung-hyuk turning back, with two kids refusing to let go, with companions who keep showing up even when Kim Dokja makes it very difficult to love him. And eventually, not easily, not cleanly, but eventually, Kim Dokja starts to believe them. That's not a hero's journey. That's something rarer. That's a person learning that they were never the supporting character in their own life. They just forgot they were allowed to be the reader and the story. If you've read ORV, or you're thinking about starting, I want to know one thing. Drop it in the comments. At what moment did Kim Dokja stop being a clever protagonist and start feeling like someone you actually worried about? For me, it's a very specific scene, but I'm not putting it in this video. That's a whole other conversation. If this kind of analysis is what you're here for, psychological deep dives, character studies, the stuff beneath the surface of the stories we love, subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.